like a Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Master System review. Now today's game was specially requested by a follower of the channel. It wasn't necessarily one of the games I was going to be covering anytime soon on the system. It doesn't really spring to the front of my mind when I think about the all-time classics on the console, but I will be taking a look at it today. Now My Hero is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game that came out in August of 1987 over here in Europe after initially being released in Japan in January of 1986. It was one of the few Master System games that had a card release and also a cartridge release, which followed a short time later. So the storyline, if you want to call it that, for My Hero is very, very simplistic. You and your girlfriend are strolling through the park when all of a sudden a thug comes, he beats you up and steals your girlfriend, and it is your mission to win her back by scrolling through the levels left to right and beating up anything and everybody that gets in your way in your quest to get your girlfriend back. So like I always do, I'm going to talk about the visuals first, and even for January of 1986, My Hero is not a particularly inspiring or interesting game to look at. It's got reasonable use of colour, but the game is so repetitive visually, and that comes down to the fact that all three of the levels in the game are the same style. They're all this town setting, and it gets very boring very quickly. There aren't a large amount of different enemies as well, mainly just the generic thug that runs, and eventually he will jump and try and kick you as you progress through the game. You get the thugs throwing the bottles out the windows. You do get a few animals, dogs and pigs running at you later on in the game, but there really is a lack of everything visually in this game. There's nothing that I could say that's a standout feature for this game visually, I don't think, at all. And I know it's an old game. I know it was one of the Sega card games, so it's like a budget title, so you could never be expecting a great looking title. But even for the time it came out, 1986, I don't believe that My Hero is a great looking game. Now if you get 4 or 5 enemies on the screen, of course you get that Master System speciality, sprite flicker. Thankfully this doesn't happen very often. You tend not to get that many enemies on the screen, but when you do, all of a sudden, yes, they're cluttered with sprite flicker. Even when you get to the bosses of the levels, it really is pretty boring there as well. It's the same beach setting every time you face a boss, so that gets repetitive too. So overall in the visual department, My Hero isn't particularly inspiring. So for as uninteresting as it is visually, the sound department, I'm afraid, is even worse for My Hero, because this is without a doubt one of the most repetitive sounding games that I've ever played in my entire life. Whether we're talking about that tune that plays through the generic levels that you go through over and over again, whether we're talking about the boss theme music, whether we're talking about the horrific sound effect that plays over and over every time you die, or the sound effect it makes when you punch or kick an enemy out of the way, this game will probably start to grate on your ears really, really quick. And the annoying thing about the main track that plays through the levels is that it doesn't even fit the style of game that this is. This is a kung fu style side-scrolling beat-em-up, and you have this happy, chirpy theme playing for the whole time. I've no idea who composed it. I've no idea why they thought it was suitable for this game, but it is not. So overall, in the sound effects and music department, My Hero is the absolute pits. So moving on to the gameplay next, and for all intent purposes, My Hero actually plays okay. It is without a doubt the strongest aspect of the game. You move your character with the D-pad, you have a punch button, and you have a jumping kick button. If you hold down on the D-pad and press the punch button, you will do a crouching kick. If you hold up on the D-pad and press the punch button, you will do a standing side kick. Unfortunately, your standard punch and your standing side kick are pretty useless. You're hardly ever going to use them. The punch has really short range, and you will rely on the jumping kick for pretty much all of your attacks. Now the game flow is very simplistic. You just go from side to side until you eventually reach the end of the screen and go into a boss battle. The strange thing here is that when you're playing the game, the standard levels, it only takes one hit from anything to make you lose a life, whether it's a projectile from a frog, whether it's a falling bottle, whether it's you just simply walking into an enemy. Yet when you face the boss of every level, you can get hit 9 times before you lose a life, which is pretty strange. The boss battles are completely different really, because it's the first one to 10 hits wins, and then you go on to the standard levels again. So it does mix it up a little bit in terms of gameplay, but it is a bit ridiculous in the fact that you're dying to anything and everything on the standard levels, yet when you come to a boss, all of a sudden you're double tough and you can get hit 9 times before you lose a life. So moving on to content and lifespan, and as I've already mentioned, there are only 3 levels on this game and 3 boss fights. Once you complete the 3rd boss fight, you cycle back to the 1st level, and it is an endless repeat, just like Transbot that I reviewed a while back. The game cannot be completed, there is no ending sequence, you simply play until you lose all of your lives. It is basically just a score attack game like Transbot, which is pretty disappointing for a game like this, because I would have rather it be about 15 minutes long and see an ending sequence, rather than it just continues and continues and continues with you cycling through the same levels, facing the same enemies over and over again, because without a doubt it is repetitive. Beyond repetitive, it is frustrating, especially with the grating music playing over and over again. And the fact that, of course, you will die in this game time and time and time again. It doesn't matter how good you are, it's really difficult to try and play through this game without losing all your lives and having to start over again. It is frustrating because you will die from literally anything. Like I've mentioned, an enemy just slightly touching you is an instant one-hit KO, and it is very, very frustrating. So overall, in the content and lifespan, My Hero does not have a whole lot of content to give, and its lifespan is absolutely shocking. So like always, that leaves us with our 2 final questions. Is My Hero worth a go in this day and age, and where will it rank in our Master System top 10? Now I will tell you straight away, My Hero is not worth playing at all. It will not bring you any enjoyment, just pure frustration in my opinion. Thankfully though, the frustration won't last long because there's not a whole lot of content here to see. Now, the other question is, where does it rank in our Master System top 10? Currently, number 1 spot is taken by Streets of Rage, the original one, whereas 5th spot is occupied by Streets of Rage 2. It won't come as any surprise when I tell you My Hero is the worst Master System game that I've looked at so far, and it is coming into that top 10 in 6th spot. Now, I don't think it's going to stay in the top 10 very long because there are far, far better games on the Master System that I will be covering in the coming weeks. But of course, as always, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone. I always say this, and I always look forward to hearing what other people have to say about the games that I've reviewed. So let me know your views on My Hero down below with a comment. Maybe even if you bought it or had it given to you as a gift when it came out back in 1987 over here in Europe. That is it today. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll be back in the near future with another review. Goodbye for now.